Thanks for being here for this week's episode of Economic News. Um, I was talking to our expert before we started, and we both saw these new IRS reporting rules. They seem like they could be a big deal for anyone with like a side hustle or small business these days.
Yeah, for sure. Something to watch out for, especially with how much the gig economy has been changing.
Yeah. So basically, the IRS is changing how they track income from third-party payment platforms, I mean.
Yeah.
Venmo, PayPal, Cash App, all those. They're going to lower how much you need to make before they send you a 1099-K form.
Yeah, it's a pretty huge change. Like before you had to make at least $20,000 or have 200 transactions before you got one. Now it's only $600. Like you can make one good sale and then bam, 1099K in the mail.
It's pretty crazy, right?
Right.
I think I read somewhere that this is how the IRS is trying to keep up with the gig economy growing so fast. They want to make sure they're getting all that income and that everyone's paying the taxes they're supposed to.
Yeah, it's kind of a way to make sure everyone's playing by the same rules. I mean, the IRS has always said that people have to report all the income they make that can be taxed. This just changes how they're keeping track of it. Like the 1099K just makes it easier for them to see what's going on.
Right, that makes sense. Though honestly, when I first heard about this, I was kind of worried.
Hmm.
Like, what if people who use these apps just for personal stuff got a 1099-K just because they split a dinner bill or sent money to their family?
Yeah, I can see why people would be worried about that. But don't worry, the new rule is specifically for business. Like if you send money to your friends or family, that won't count. So go ahead and send your roommate money for pizza, you're good.
Okay, good. That's good to know. But for people who are running their own business or a side hustle, this is a big change. One of the articles we read suggested putting aside 20% of your earnings for taxes if you have a side hustle. Does that sound right to you?
Yeah, definitely a good idea. Better to have a bit too much than not enough when it's time to pay your taxes.
Yeah, I agree. I have a different bank account for all my business income.
Hmm.
It makes it way easier to see what I'm spending and what I owe at tax time.
Oh, that's a good tip. Yeah, organization is really important for all this. Speaking of which, that article also mentioned that using a business credit card could be good. You can get rewards for things you're buying for your business. I think they specifically mentioned stuff like tax software.
Yeah, that's true. I hadn't thought about that. You're looking at tax software. That article recommended TurboTax and H&R Block.
Hmm.
Those seemed like good options.
Yeah, I've used both of those before. TurboTax is really easy to use. It pretty much walks you through every step. And they have that live support thing, right?
Yeah. For a little extra, you can chat with a tax expert online. You can even get a CPA to check your return before you file.
Oh, nice. That would probably make people feel better, especially if their taxes are more complicated.
Definitely. And then there's H&R Block. They have their online version, which is pretty similar, but they also have a ton of offices if you want to meet someone in person. True, yeah. Some people probably just feel more comfortable talking to someone face-to-face about all that.
Right. And one other thing about H&R Block, they help you if you get audited, which is a big plus. Audits are the worst.
Ugh, yeah, totally. So TurboTax and H&R Block both have their good and bad sides. It sounds like it just depends on what you prefer and what features are most important to you.
Yeah, exactly. Just do a little research and see what works best for you.
Good advice.
Yeah.
Okay, so back to this $600 rule. I was thinking about how this could change things for a lot of people with side gigs. Like, I have a friend, Sarah. I wonder if this will mean more people will start incorporating or getting an LLC.
Oh, interesting. I hadn't thought about that. It definitely gives people something else to think about when they're trying to decide if they want to turn their side hustle into a real business.
Right. Like,
Mhm.
say you're selling crafts on Etsy or you do some freelance writing on the side. This might make them want to make it official.
And there are some tax advantages when you structure your business that way. Like you might be able to write off some expenses that you couldn't as a sole proprietor.
Hmm. Okay, so let's say you're just starting out with a side hustle. Would you recommend just going ahead and forming an LLC or S Corp right away?
It's hard to say. The best way to structure your business depends on a lot of things, like how much money you're making, what kind of work you're doing, and what your goals are.
Yeah, so it's probably good to talk to a tax person early on to figure out the best way to do it.
Definitely. They can explain the different ways to do it and help you decide what's best for you.
Okay, cool. That's helpful. One thing that stood out to me in those articles was that it's really important to keep track of everything. They were saying that the IRS is coming down hard on people who aren't reporting their income the right way.
Yeah, the IRS is definitely getting better at tracking things, and they're keeping a close eye on all the online platforms. It's not like it used to be where it was easy to miss things.
Right, so it's super important to be organized and have proof of everything.
Absolutely. Keep track of all your income and what you spend, put everything in the right categories, and save all your receipts.
So all this talk about organization makes me think about spreadsheets. Are those still the best way to keep track of everything? Or are there better ways to do it now?
I mean, spreadsheets are definitely still a good way to do it,
Yeah.
especially if you're comfortable with them. But there are a bunch of apps now, too, that can make keeping track of your money even easier.
Oh, really? Like what?
Well, some apps can connect to your bank accounts, and they put your spending in categories automatically, which can save a ton of time.
That sounds amazing. What else?
There are also apps that can do things like make invoices or track how much you drive so you can write it off on your taxes. They can even guess how much you'll owe in taxes each quarter. It's crazy how much easier technology makes all this.
Yeah, it's like having a robot to do all your finances.
Yeah.
So if there are all these tools out there, do you need to hire a bookkeeper or accountant anymore?
Hmm, that's a good question. For some people, it might be enough to just use the apps and do it themselves, especially if their business is pretty simple. But if your business is more complicated or if you just don't want to deal with all that yourself, then it's probably worth it to hire a professional.
So what are the main reasons to hire someone?
Well, they can help you understand all the complicated tax stuff and make sure you're writing off everything you can. Plus, you don't have to worry about making any mistakes, and they can actually often save you more money than it costs to hire them.
Right. Makes sense, especially if you don't really like dealing with numbers. Or you'd rather spend your time on other parts of your business.
Yeah, exactly. It just depends on what works best for you.
Okay, so we've talked about a lot today. The new $600 rule, keeping track of your money, different tax software, and even whether or not to hire someone to help you. What's the one thing you want people to remember from all of this?
I'd say the most important thing is to be prepared. This new rule starts next year, so now is the time to get organized. Whether that's opening a new bank account, looking into tax software, or talking to a tax person, don't wait until the last minute.
Yeah, good point. It's way less stressful to stay on top of things than to try to catch up later.
For sure. And remember, the IRS website has a bunch of info for small businesses and freelancers. That's a great place to start.
Awesome. Thanks for all the great advice. I feel like I understand the $600 rule a lot better now.
Glad I could help. It's definitely important for people to know about.
Thanks to everyone for listening to this week's episode of Economic News. We'll be back next week with another deep dive into the world of finance. See you then.